So again, welcome to today's Irrational Labs open event, 3 behavioral science insights to improve your healthcare product with Dr. Lindsay Juarez. We don't get to call her doctor very often, so I get to drop that on her. You probably know by now that we're Irrational Labs, and we've worked with hundreds of top organizations to bring the behavioral design approach into their processes. If we were superheroes, we're not superheroes, but I hear superheroes have an origin story. To those ends, our origin story starts at the Googleplex. We built the original behavioral and economics business unit there, and we work with over 25 teams across Google to basically embed BSI into the work they do at Google almost a decade ago. Since then, we've run over 100 experiments with companies big and small, and we've trained thousands of people on how to use behavioral design in their product. Additionally, some of those experiments are case studies at our website. Once Lindsay gets started, I will link you to the case studies. You can explore those and see what we've done for clients in the field. There are 3 powerful ways to use behavioral insights to innovate and grow. 1, product design. We help people work on behavioral change within product and sometimes service. 2, we do BSI training. And then 3, we work with BSI and AI strategy with companies large and small. So with that in mind, you know what we do. And one of the people that does it best for us is Lindsay Juarez. So she specializes in all the things, but let me tell you a little bit about her. Her bio is so big and so impressive that it almost doesn't fit on a slide. That's right. So let me tell you a little bit about Lindsay. She's an expert, as you may have gathered, by applying behavioral science insights to encourage meaningful behavioral change. She's really interested in interventions that make daily behaviors that daily behavioral changes that lead to long-term goal success, like exercising or saving for retirement. At Irrational Labs, Lindsay focuses on designing and testing interventions in the financial and health domains. Before she joined IL, she was a senior behavioral researcher at the Center for Advanced Hindsight at Duke University, where a behavioral science center committed to making people happier, healthier, and wealthier. I'm sorry, I'm getting so many clicks coming up that I'm like, what's happening? I'm admitting people to the room. But prior to coming to Irrational Labs and working at the Center for Advanced Hindsight, she worked for the Federal Government Accountability Office and at New York University on a series of multi-site school interventions to reduce the academic achievement gap. Her research has been funded by grants from the National Science Foundation and the Templeton Foundation and published in top policy and psychology journals. She's consulted for energy and sustainability nonprofits and worked with clients as varied as meditation startups and cookbooks. This is an interesting story. You can ask her in the Q&A, to international banks to incorporate behavioral science insights. Lindsay is no joke when it comes to the book learning. She received her bachelor's from Reed College in Oregon. You may know Reed as the place Steve Jobs dropped out of, and she has a PhD in social psychology from the University of Virginia. And she is here. Oh, this is important. I mean, she's also a yoga mastermind, and she's a yoga teacher cert. Lindsay, I have to tell you, I went to this deep yoga program, and I hadn't gone in a long time, and it was like deep stretch, and I think it broke me. My lower back was like all jacked up for like 15 hours afterwards, but then it got better. So maybe if you were teaching me, it would have been better.
Maybe. I mean,
Maybe.
that sounds like maybe it was tough. It sounds
Yeah, it was,
challenging. I'll
well,
leave
they
it there.
billed it as deep stretch, and I think it was too deep stretch
Maybe
is what
too
I
much
would have
stretch.
named it, but no one asked me. So anyways, with that, you're in for a treat today. So Lindsay, take it away. Enlighten people. Let's get these medical products better.
Okay, let's do. Now I'm screen sharing and let me get everything all situated so I can see faces and the chat.
And just as we're doing that, remember, Lindsay's presentation will be about 40 minutes, then we'll be open for Q&A. So if you have questions, you can drop them in the chat. I will be tracking those throughout the event. But of course, yeah, the Q&A is the most fun, right, Linz?
Yeah, definitely. And if there are questions along the way, feel free to pipe up if it's urgent, or we can get to it as we go. But otherwise, I'll go ahead and get into it. So on the screen, maybe you are thinking about these problems depending on what your health app does, or you're in physical health, like people in a room. I think there's still ideas to be gained here. But all of these are healthcare challenges, yes, but they are at their very core behavioral challenges. And so thinking about, how do I change behavior? How do I maybe stop a behavior? How do I increase a positive behavior? All of that is something that ideally we can help you with, because behavioral health is important. And so I love this image. You've probably maybe seen it across different IL talks, because it's just so perfect. And the idea is, most people are not coming into your health product or an appointment, preventative care, and saying, I'm going to skip it. I don't care. Just like, let me live my smoking donut, no exercise life forever. It is something else. And so I promise you 3 behavioral insights about health. I will start with a lightning round of what is behavioral design, what is the behavioral perspective on why people are skipping that appointment. And this first one is perhaps something that resonates with you. Um, Action intention gap. And so you know how to do things, you know what to do, and it just doesn't follow through. I think eating is a big one. This 100%, I have done this. I have gotten dressed, I've put on my yoga clothes at the beginning of the day, and then 5 o'clock rolls around and I have still not done any yoga, but I sat in my exercise pants all day. And it's that people are not perfectly rational. And so choices in the moment may prioritize hedonic pleasures, immediate benefits, being a little bit lazy, and they're not always going to align with those long-term goals that we have for ourselves. And you can't just give people information. So calorie labels on a menu generally do not work. They do not reduce the amount of calories that people are consuming, even when you put them on a menu. There are some exceptions to the rule. Blueberry muffins, it turns out, are a big one, where people say, oh, a muffin is a cake. A muffin is not a health food. But in most cases, you can't just give people information, because there are so many other influences on their choices. And what you can do then is change the context. And so that's what I'm building up to here in this talk, is thinking about, what is the decision-making context? How can you get better at recognizing the influences that are acting and forces on choices? And then how do you design around those, since you are product managers, designers, people thinking about how to send messages, marketing, whatever it might be. And so I realize, abstractly, I have not told you what's happening in this image, but this is the cafeteria at Google. Google runs a lot of experiments. One of the ones they did was they monitored how many people got a snack to go along with their coffee, depending on what side of the building they came into the kitchen on. And so you can see on the left side of the kitchen, you turn right around from the coffee machine, there are the snacks. If you happen to have an office on the right side of the hall that comes in this side, you have a few more steps. I think it's 9 feet, 11 feet, that gets you to the snack machine from the coffee. And when you are on the right side of the hallway, you are much less likely to reduce snack consumption, because you have to walk a little bit more. And that's friction in action. That's the decision-making context. In this case, the physical environment, but also the decision-making environment in which people are making choices, is going to do quite a bit for making changes. And so when people are skipping their appointment, it's probably not malicious, but rather thinking about everything else going on in the world, all of these different pressures, time constraints, memory constraints, everything that they have to do. So how do you design for that context? How do you use behavioral interventions as opposed to just information, as opposed to just making people feel an emotion? Instead, let's think about, what can you do to really change things? So the difference here, perhaps a cognitive intervention would be telling people to label the calories, or using green light, red light stop signs on a calorie label. Perhaps you've seen those. Affective, thinking about emotions, thinking about hedonic pressures, giving people a fun name for a food. That can be a nice way. There's a woman, Alia Crum out of Stanford, does a lot on thinking about how to make things feel flashier, health foods. But ultimately, behavioral is going to be where you get movement. So thinking about slicing fruit up to make it easier to eat, putting it near the checkout. And so behavioral insights, what can we do thinking about health? The first one is information overload. Don't do it. Don't give people a ton of information and hope that they can figure it out. So thinking about feedback and what are you doing with that? Thinking about emotions, I alluded to that a little bit, thinking about how people respond both to good health news, bad health news, how can you make it more enjoyable, emotions in general. And then thinking about timing and when are you asking people to do things? When do they need to do it? Are they forgetting? Are you reminding? And I'm always trying when I'm giving talks, when I'm giving advice, to think about how will people remember this better and avoid information overload, design for emotions, time it right. I was like, well, it could almost be the 3 Fs. So feedback, feelings, reminders. You just have to work with me here. And so let's get into it. So this first one, feedback. The first issue is going to be too much information, and resist as best you can giving people infographics, giving people dashboards, making them parse through things that are risk tables, or here's 20 pieces of advice to improve your cardiovascular health. This is not something that the layperson is equipped to deal with. We're not doctors. You have to tell people what to do with this information. So I'll give you an anecdote. Kristen was using this once, and I thought it was really enlightening. How do you get faster when you're hiking? And maybe you're a hiking expert, maybe you have never hiked in your life, but thinking about it, how would you get faster? Longer steps. Dan, exactly. What you actually have to do thinking about hiking, sometimes the intuition is, well, I've got to train more, I've got to drink more water, I need more trail mix. What it really comes down to, and what experts realize, hype music, it's not going to hurt at all. But it's actually dumping things out of your backpack, and having a lighter backpack is going to make you faster. And so when experts know what to do and how to solve a problem, you are experts in your product, in your behavior, in your space. Be a little bit paternalistic, because remember, people have so much going on. If you know the right thing, help them figure out what it is, make it easier for them to know what to do. And so thinking about that when you're trying to get people to encourage a behavior, the Apple rings are really nice because they tell you exactly what to do, right? Move around a lot, stand up some more, drink some water, close these rings, right? And the other thing to think about in feedback is the body is bad at feedback. So ideally, just stop measuring weight. This is one of my favorite charts of all time. This is from the British Medical Journal, and the researcher was doing a case study, and he was looking at how to lose weight, cutting calories, and measured himself multiple times a day. You can see like however many time points that is, and found that weight fluctuates more within a day than it did across what ultimately ended up being 12 weeks of monitoring his weight. That if he drank breakfast, if he went to the bathroom, if he had a nap, just weight, the body, incredibly noisy. It does not make it easy for you to learn patterns. And of course, weight loss is about very long-term changes. And so anything you're doing in the moment is not immediately going to result in the change that you want. You have to think about how to give a different sort of feedback. And so this is a nice way, maybe don't tell people how much they weigh if they're thinking about weight loss. Shape is a scale that Irrational Labs worked on designing, and you set up a baseline. It tracks your weight. You step on the scale every day, because stepping on the scale is good for reminding yourself about your goals. But getting that number, seeing 200.7, none of that is helpful to you. And so instead, it gives you a smoothed line, a running average of, are you on track? Are you holding steady? Given the last 2 weeks, are you ticking up? Is that something that you wanted to do? If you're trying to put on muscle, are you ticking down? If that's something you wanted to do, giving you feedback that doesn't get so specific that you get overwhelmed. The other thing you can do is give specific feedback, but much, much faster. And so Levels is an app thinking about blood sugar and glycemic index. And so if you eat something, it tells you immediately, oh, that was sugary. Look at your blood spiking. Now you know for the future. And so a couple questions, just thinking about this first one, thinking about feedback, information, giving information to people. Are you, in this app that you're looking at in your product, are you giving too much feedback? Are you giving confusing, unhelpful feedback? People don't know how to translate it into action. If that's the case, could you give more helpful feedback, or could you just cut back? The next insight, thinking about behavioral health, is emotions and thinking about rewarding things. And how do you make something fun? How do you make it more enjoyable? I saw a quote recently. It was a little bit hokey, but it also spoke to me, thinking about exercise. And it was, is this something that you're doing to your body or with your body? And right, some of that mindset, some of that thinking about, am I enjoying this? Am I having a good time? Makes it much more sustainable, much more enjoyable to keep returning to it. And health, more than anything else, is about consistency and doing it again and again and again. And if something sucks, it's just going to be so hard to do it over and over again. And so think about, how can you add positive emotions? How can you bribe? Yes, but just how do you make something slightly more intrinsically motivating? Can you make it fun? Can you connect it to purpose that I care about? Connect it to people, whatever it might be. Back when companies were thinking very hard about sort of public goods and the public health, they bribed people to get vaccines with weed in one case, with donuts. But this also, you see it in a more mundane context, right? The dentist gives toddlers a toy car, a lollipop after going to the dentist. It can be a very nice way to say, here's something that's a little bit challenging. Let's make it a little bit more fun. And that does work out in an exercise context as well. Katie Milkman, I would say one of the geniuses in behavioral science and also running really good experiments to test these things, found that if you brought people into the gym and you basically held their audiobook hostage, they could only listen to their book when they were at the gym. They locked it up. They had physical lockers behind the desk when you checked in, that people went much more often than if they did not have that. They could listen to their audiobook at the gym, but they could also take it home. They could listen to it everywhere. And so by restricting it, making it a little bit more scarce, you put that temptation with this unpleasant activity, potentially unpleasant activity, and make it a little bit nicer. And then people go more often, and people recognize this. They say, yeah, I would continue doing this. This was a great idea. And so thinking about, how do you layer on positive emotions? Obey is sort of my online exercise platform of choice. They do a nice thing where it's basically a white label Zoom and you can work out with your friends. This is a fun way that I and some of the people who live far away from me meet up, and we do a little bit of fitness. We do a lot of chatting. And then this next one, thinking about emotions, I don't know who came to Mike Norton's talk recently, so this may be a familiar question to some of you, but play along anyway, which is, think about your sort of getting ready routine, your getting ready ritual, if you will. Do you shower, then brush your teeth? Do you brush your teeth, then you take a shower? Or you live chaotically? All these showers last. Interesting. I shower and then I brush my teeth. But the kicker to this question is less, is there a right way to do it? No, there's not. But instead, is it something where if you flipped it, it would feel wrong? I'm seeing some nods. I think some people, it doesn't matter. You're like, I do whatever I want. Sometimes I do it first, sometimes I do it later. But I think for other people, you're like, oh God, who would do that? It would just feel so unsettled. And what you're getting at there is this distinction between a habit, something I do every day without thinking much about it, versus a ritual, which is something I do in a very particular way. And actually, there are a lot of rules here, and there's a right way to do it. And it's very tied to some sort of purpose. It's very tied to the goal. And the distinction here, because I think a lot of products, when we talk to people, they say, I want to make this a habit. I want product use to be a habit. I want this healthy behavior to be a habit. And that's great. In a lot of cases, you do want something to be so automatic that you don't think about it, you don't engage with it, you just get it done. But there are some cases where you might be well served by thinking about, is this something where I actually want people to pause and I want them to take some time, and maybe it's positively rewarding. Maybe it's not even fun per se, but it is something that feels meaningful to me. And what does that do for the likelihood that you complete the behavior? Mike Norton wrote an entire book called The Ritual Effect, saying that, yes, when you add rituals to something, to a behavior, to a family, to a relationship, to a goal, it increases coherence, it increases your self-control, it increases the likelihood that that behavior will happen. And so I would not say that now suddenly you need to live your life like always thinking about rituals, but it is worth saying, what is my goal for the user? How is the user likely to think about this behavior? And is there a way that maybe I want people to spend more time thinking about this rather than less? This is a couple of screens from a flow. We designed a blood pressure app, and the goal was, of course, regulating blood pressure. But one of the things you need to do when you are taking blood pressure medication is track blood pressure. And so you need people to do it every day. People do not take a lot of health behaviors every day if they don't have to. And so what we tried to do in this case was build in a ritual, taking a moment to yourself to take your hand on your heart, take a deep breath, and relax. And so now there's this extra layer of meaning on top of this behavior, rather than trying to say, oh, just fit in your blood pressure check whenever you can, or do it every day at 12, right? You could add those things, but maybe having a moment to connect it to something more meaningful is nice. This is a screenshot from Shape-a, that no feedback scale from earlier. That's another one where you try to tie it to existing behaviors, thinking about how you can stack stuff together to make it a little more likely to happen. So we talked about positive emotions. The next one is negative emotions. And I alluded to this earlier, but what is the path to goal pursuit? Is it easy and always works out and never any problems? Or is it your entire life when you're thinking about health, basically until the day you die? And it's the second, in my belief. This is a couple pages from this children's book that I really love. It's about this penguin, and he has a lot of friends, and his friends are very precise. They march in line, they know what they're doing, and his name is Tacky, and he's just a big old mess, and nothing he does works out. And I would say, and there's research to back it up, the idea is that long-term goal pursuit is more this path. It's about circling back. It's about resisting, recognizing that you failed, and then returning to the goal rather than a continuous straight pursuit in which you never screw up. And so as you design a product, you do have to think about, people will fail. How do I get them to not wallow? How do I not get them to say, well, I could never do it, and so I might as well not try? But instead, how do you get them back on track? And so thinking about, can you build in Slack, perhaps? Can you give people a cheat day? And what you see here is people are less likely to give up on their weight loss goals, basically, if they have a cheat day built into their diet plan. And if you give people, this one didn't call it a cheat day, but they called it emergency reserves. And again, you're increasing the likelihood that if people miss something, if they have a failure, if they have a day where they didn't hit their step goal, that they get back on track the next day instead of saying, ugh, well, that's the whole week shot. And here is Duolingo. Duolingo is great at streaks. I read an article recently that said the longest streak on Duolingo right now is 4,100 days, which is incredible, right? I am amazed. And so that person doesn't need any Slack. That person doesn't need any emergency reserves. But they do offer it for the average user. You can plan for a cheat day. You can plan for an emergency reserve if you mess up and you need to get back on track. All of those things help people stay motivated when they have a setback. And so thinking about how to layer in those elements, I think is actually just as important as thinking about positive reinforcement in the moment is then when people have something unpleasant happen, how do you get them back? And so a couple of questions to ask yourself as you think about that element as well. So thinking about immediate rewards, what can you do in the moment to make it more pleasurable, whether that's something inherent to the experience, or if you need to bring in friends, you need to bring in bribes. Is it automatic, thoughtless? Is it something a little bit more focused? Is this a ritual that you're trying to build? And then what do you do when someone messes up? Maybe I'll pause for a second. Do we normally pause? I feel like I'm just talking, or is it
Well, I
nicer?
mean, you're totally welcome to pause. I mean, if you want to get some questions in, I'm into that. Does
Yeah,
anybody have a
awesome.
question that they'd like answered, or a positive or negative emotion they'd like to share at this
Exactly.
moment?
Layer it on.
Or does somebody need a reward?
Yeah. No, I can also keep going. I just wasn't sure.
Well, let's see. I mean, we can wait a second. Dan, though, he does have gratitude. Oh, so now
Okay.
people are giving you love. That's
Ah,
good.
there we go.
The positive attention's good. I'd roll with it.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'd say carry on, and we'll just yeah. Oh, Rajiv says you're very well organized and interesting. Yeah,
Ah, thank you. Thank
yeah.
you, everyone. I love
Take
it.
a
Okay.
photo of that one and put a tattoo on your forearm. All right, well,
Mm,
carry on.
okay. This is the third insight. So now we talked about emotions, we talked about feedback. Now thinking about timing. And this one, maybe this is my bonus. This is very near and dear to me at the moment because I like yoga, and this time last year I bought a 30 class pack at the yoga studio, literally an 8-minute walk from my house. And about 6 weeks ago, I was checking and I discovered I bought 30 originally. I had 16 that I needed to get through in the next 6 weeks. So, guys, do as I say, not as I do. But it was such a like very vivid example for me of thinking about timing, thinking about scheduling, thinking about the power of deadlines, and just getting back on track with sort of an out of the house exercise habit. And so, yeah, do you have a deadline to put into your product? And if so, what can you do with that? So the rest of these are thinking about defaults. And so as you think about defaults, what I'm trying to get at here is thinking about reminders and how do you make it the easiest possible path forward for someone to do the right behavior, whatever it is. And so in this case, this is not a health behavior. This is thinking about retirement. But here are two companies, and maybe this is probably someone in the audience knows this one. What's the difference between the orange companies, where about 47% of people are saving for retirement, versus the blue companies, where you've got about 93% saving for retirement? Is it the industry? Is it the employee type? Exactly. It's defaults. It's what kind of form were people using when they filled out their retirement paperwork. If you have people opt into retirement savings, you get some uptake. But if you have people enrolled by default and then they need to opt out or they need to adjust it by themselves, you get many more people saving for retirement, which is a behavior that many people report that they want to do. And you just have that gap, that whatever 47 minus 93, it's about 46% that are maybe would save if it had been slightly easier, if there had been a default set up for them. And I will call out health behaviors, also finances, are often a very heavily regulated space. And so it may be slightly more challenging for you to set up a true default and really lock someone in. But you can also think about places where the behavior will feel a little bit more like a default, even if you can't necessarily enforce it. So thinking about pre-scheduling your next appointments, this is another place where dentists are doing it really well, right? As soon as you finish your current appointment, they lock you in, they say, let's schedule you for 6 weeks from now, 6 months from now. And you're like, yes, my calendar is open. Okay, let's do it. And then they lock you in and it's in my calendar. And so 6 months later, I show up the way I should. And this is true. HPV vaccines, that's a 2-shot series, trying to get people to show up for the next one. If you can pre-schedule, if you can suggest that this is the natural next step, people are much more likely to get a vaccine when their doctors make the appointment, or when they come in and they say, today we're having, childhood vaccinations, and let's go ahead and do that. Where there is room to decline, you can reschedule, you can cancel, but when it is already taken care of, some of it is the implied norm, it's the authority figure speaking as well. Some of it is the reduction of logistics. Now I don't have to look at my calendar, think about balancing. I don't have to call somebody and wait on hold to get this appointment. It's scheduled for me, and I can always adjust it if I need to, but it's that much easier when you can take out some of these steps, when you can make the default, when you can make something a little bit simpler. And then as you think about making things easier, people will forget. People will 100% forget. And so remind them and get it on the calendar. I love a calendar. Calendars work in pharmacies too. We worked with a large retail pharmacy that already had an infrastructure in place to text people messages. And what they did in this case was, as soon as you picked up one refill, this is people on chronic, I believe it was heart medications, but they weren't on auto refill. And so every month someone needed to remember to call in, may I get another refill? I'll come get it in a minute when it's ready. And what they found was, if when you picked up one prescription, you got a thank you message coming from your pharmacist and a nudge to say, come back next month to go ahead and refill the prescription, you got much higher refill requests, and people then showed up to pick up those refills. It wasn't just that they prepped refills and then people didn't come in to get them, which would be a problem. And they had much higher click-through rates. And one thing that I also really loved about this study was they had people just writing back and being like, you're so welcome. Thank you for being my pharmacist. And they were like, people never reply to our messages saying anything but stop or I hate this. Please don't message me anymore. And so I think it was probably two-pronged, really, this human connection, this positive reinforcement, thanks for coming in, and this reminder layered on top of it. Similarly, you can ask people, this is COVID vaccinations. There's obviously in the health space a lot of research done thinking about how do you get people to get vaccinated when that was such a big push. And this was looking at reminder messages that layered on an element of psychological ownership. And so thinking about you'll see a lot of language around claim your redeem your vaccination, your appointment has been reserved already for you, this ownership language that makes it feel like it's already mine. You're leveraging a bit of the endowment effect. When people own something, when it feels like they belong to them, then they are that much more likely, that much more protective. They'll ask more to pay if you're trying to sell it. They just really value it higher. And does that then result in them coming up, showing up to the appointment in this case? You see that basically all reminders are good. Ownership ticks you up a tiny bit, but even a simple reminder is going to increase the rate of appointments in this case. And I'll also call out, so there's a lot of bars here. The gray is just a holdout control group. They didn't get a reminder. You start adding reminders in the orange, you start adding the ownership, your appointment, your vaccination. And then the pale bars, they had a video go along with it instead of just the message, you don't have to do a video. No need to pivot to video. It doesn't have to get that complicated. Um, just a reminder is a really nice way to do something. And then I talked about this a little bit with the pharmacist, thinking about accountability. Is there a way when you remind people, can you also add an element of not just remember to do this, but remember to do this, I'll check on you. And so Katie was signed up to do PT, and at the end of her PT sessions, her doctor gets a report on whether or not she has completed those sessions. So there is this sense of being checked on, being accountable to someone. Maybe it's not a doctor in the case of a health app, but you could still think about, is there an accountability buddy? Do you want to involve others? It's tough with HIPAA, but sometimes there are ways to get people to opt in, or if you're thinking about exercise, that's one where it's a lot easier to say, like, find a workout buddy, and then you don't skip the gym as much. So in that case, sort of my prompt questions here are defaults, thinking about what's easy for people, what's automatic. Is there a way you can change that path a little bit? Are people forgetting? Do they not know what to do? If they don't know what to do, you do have to give people information sometimes, but many times people know what to do, and it's that intention action gap. And so helping close that partly by making it easy, but then of course by telling people, oh, it's time. You may have forgotten, your life is busy. And counterpoint, maybe you need to cut notifications. Are you sending too many? And are people losing the point? Are you sending so much that the salience has been lost? And can you reset to focus on the important things? So with that, I think I'm coming in right on time for insights for health. So this first one, thinking about information overload, you really want to focus on simplified reporting and actionable feedback. Help people know exactly what to do and tell them the right thing. Don't ask them to parse a really difficult chart. Don't ask them to understand a risk calculator. Don't say, these are the 5 things that go into your health score. Just say, walk 10,000 steps, close your ring, stand up more, right? Send them those reminders. If you are thinking about emotions, ideally make it feel good, and make it feel good. Think about what to do, how to resolve negative emotions as well in those places where people fall off the wagon. And then finally, thinking about timing, thinking about defaults and what makes it easy. How can you do it more often? How can you give people reminders so that if they forget, that doesn't then move you back into that failure position, right? You can send them something just in time to save it. And so with that, I am excited to answer questions.
Wow. Wow, Lindsay. I'm going to remove your spotlight, but that's not because you aren't a star. So everybody, if you could give your best emoji love to Lindsay for that wonderful talk today. Hopefully you feel healthier or guiltier because
Already.
you didn't do something today already. You're like, oh, I have to go do yoga, workout, or put money in my savings account. All these things are possible from your talk today, Lindsay. Before we go into Q&A, just some quick reminders. We'll kind of wrap up at about 5 to the hour. Lindsay is one of many brilliant Rational Labs consultants we have working here at the company. Should you want someone like her to work with your team in the chat, please email Amy at Irrational Labs. We'd love to collaborate with you. Do you like the way that Lindsay tears down products? Kristen does it every week at her Substack, so make sure you subscribe to her stack. And lastly, although most of you are in the loop, but say you're not, the newsletter, yep, it's right there. There's the link. So commercial interruptions officially complete. What questions do we have? Oh, there we go. Rajiv, why don't you just take it away? Come on the mic and get the party started.
Hi, Lindsay. That was really interesting. Thank you so much for a very well-structured presentation. I've been looking at some of the health apps, and there was I came across this rather negative report that said that in specifically in the diabetes management that these nudge apps are not really effective overall. And I'm wondering whether you have looked at that or whether you think that was just a poor selection of apps. Do you have any examples of apps that do it really well, or what your general opinion is on those.
I don't know this particular report. I was trying to skim your press release or the article very quickly right then, but I'm not sure what they found. I will say diabetes is incredibly tough. It's one of those where you have to make a lot of different health behaviors and decisions all at once, and then the body is slow. HbA1c, A1c takes, right, it's like a lag of 3 months. That's part of why they use it, is because it is this more stable measure. We did some diabetes work. I haven't worked in the diabetes space recently, but it's very tough because so much of it is tied up in eating and all those social elements. And I wonder, it's a tough one to do by yourself, basically. And so is an app that's focused on a single member of a family able to drive those sorts of changes? I think it's probably one of those situations where you have to think about a system and a family, and is someone cooking for children who are ornery and they don't want to eat vegetables, they don't want to eat low sugar options, which is all, I guess, to say it's probably not bad to have an app that reminds you to check your blood sugar or reminds you to take a walk, and probably not enough either, right? Because it is so multiply determined. That's not very satisfying, I know.
No, thank you. Thank you. That's actually helpful. I do like this idea of maybe involving other people in the immediate, social surrounding of the actual patient. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. And Rajiv, you have a great looking background there. Well done with your books. They look very measured. Some people do color. You look like you're very, very sensitive to the size of your book spine. I'm just putting that out there, man. So Abhishia, did I say that correctly? You're on next.
It's Abisha.
I was close. But anyways, Abhisha, talk to us.
Yeah, so my question was that how do these behavioral insights work with apps that have certain aspects which could be stigmatized in certain countries or certain socio-cultural contexts? For instance, like if there's an app to measure the menstrual cycle within a country like India or like an Asian country wherein this is a topic that's very stigmatized. So then how can behavioral science come into picture?
In those cases, forgive me, what are you trying to do? Because I think that would sort of drive it, as sort of what is, I'll use the IL phrase, what's your key behavior? Because then if you are really, really uncomfortably specific on what am I trying to get someone to do in my app, then I think it invites more specific diagnoses around, okay, this is probably the barrier that's blocking them. Like if you want people to track their cycle every day and report like period, yes, no, maybe if that's the behavior, right, I could see how cultural stigma might keep you from wanting to have that app visible on your phone. You wouldn't want reminders coming through. And so then in turn, you as the designer would need to think about like, okay, well, maybe I have to find a subtle icon and I need to change the way the reminders come through in a particular way. I need to let people be able to personalize that. So back to you, what are you hoping that they would do? And then I think it follows, it'd be a little more specific how to solve.
No, I think it answers my question because I just thought of it on my feet. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. It's an interesting one for sure.
Awesome. Next we're going to go to Nitin. Did I say that correctly? Ugh.
Yeah, correct.
Whew, good. Okay, let me get you unpinned. Let me get you pinned. Okay, tell us your question.
Yeah, sure. So I'm actually building something for people who have back pain to exercise every day. And they have prescribed exercises by the physio, or they have a prescribed exercise program. We send it through WhatsApp. One thing I noticed is that as soon as people skip a day, or they usually skip like even one question which is being asked or some information being shared, they stop using the flow. So that means they drop out. And I felt like it's extremely difficult to get them back to. So do you have any suggestion on, once they actually, because every time the app asks whether you have done the exercise or not, where we have seen is as soon as the patient doesn't reply, the patient completely drops out because he feels the shame that that he hasn't done the exercise, he or she hasn't done the exercise, and then they think like, I don't know whether to reply or not. So would love to have your insights on this.
Yeah, that's a very hard one. I think your intuition that there's shame coming in
Yeah.
is a nice one. And shame is not a particularly productive emotion, right? And so I think if there is a way to give people a resolution to and like give some control back. Okay, I do in fact have agency over this. I can change this even if I didn't have time or I wasn't able to get to it today. And I wonder if how long is a session?
It's a 5 minute, or it's kind of continuous exercise. We ask them to do every day just 1 or 2 exercises, so they can do it any time of the day.
Mhm. I see. When you set up the app, did they pre-commit to the time of day, or do you schedule reminders at a particular time, or it's just sort of reminders come ad
Yeah,
hoc?
we schedule the reminders.
Okay, that's good. I wonder if in those cases, so people aren't doing it, they say no, they're embarrassed or they've disengaged.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's better in those cases if you could give people a moment to offer feedback and they could say like, oh, I didn't like that exercise, I want a different one, and to feel like they could personalize it and have some sort of ability to change that would then it gives them a little bit more ownership over the experience, and maybe that would be helpful. I wonder, you could play around with the question itself so that it didn't have to be
Yeah.
a no answer. Like if you think they're at risk, I don't know if you have factors that then you could predict, like this person is likely to be falling off the wagon. And then you could rephrase and be like, oh, do you need extra support? Do you need more time today? Do you need one exercise instead of two? And then
Yeah.
that could be a way to sort of ease your way in a little bit, sort of foot in the door, but lower the lift.
Got it.
Oh,
Cool.
I see
no,
some
that's
people in
great.
chat
Thank
too.
you so much. Dr. Beard, come on down.
Okay, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Lindsay, for this awesome presentation. I work in the smoking cessation space. I'm working to help people give up nicotine. And so I was just wondering if you had any behavioral insights around how to get people to use NRT. We also have a difficulty with getting people to complete our 6-week smoking cessation group.
They just drop out. Is it in person or it's virtual?
We do both. We offer, and we do have a high attrition rate in both formats.
I assume they're dropping out because they take up smoking again, not that they just stop coming to meetings.
Well, sometimes we don't know
Mhm.
because we never see them again. But sometimes, there's life circumstances that drop out. But also it's delayed discounting, and they choose to be happy now by smoking rather than um, you know um, looking in the future to a healthier life. So I'm thinking, health messages do not work. I know that. um, they don't tend to resonate with the people. So I was just wondering if you had some other insights to share specifically around smoking cessation.
Yeah. With smoking, it's huge context. right? Like I leave work and I walk out the front door and I'm in a habit of then I light up. And so there are so many environmental cues that you have to try and overhaul. I think that's a big part of smoking cessation, is trying to think about how do you disconnect those cues? How do you change your routine? Do you walk home a different way? Do you walk home at a different time so then you don't have to see your usual smoke friends? All of those things are part of it. And I think replacement behaviors, I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here. Like, how can you still have the movement? How can you still have the ritual without the negative sort of consequences of smoking? I think the spiciest version of smoking cessation, there is some work where basically you take a pot of money and it's loss aversion. And you're like, this is, sometimes it's your money, sometimes it's money that we're giving you but holding hostage. And then if you smoke, you lose it. And I think it works quite well, and people hate it. No one opts into this type of program. This sort of like put money on the line and then you lose it if it doesn't come through. So I don't know if you have someone in your group who that appeals to, you could try, because when people opt in and they're able to, and they tend to do quite well with those programs, but it's very hard. It hurts.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I think we can squeeze one last question in. So Andrea, go ahead. Oh, you're super quiet, Andrea. Is there a way to amplify yourself?
Now, is it better now?
A little bit.
I'll try to speak a bit louder. Hopefully that will be a bit better.
Yeah, well, I think I'll just read your question from the chat.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So using the example of encouraging vaccination with donuts, how do you avoid the reactance effect with this, especially with the politically sensitive nature of vaccine in certain countries? Not naming names.
So it sounds like the question is, how do you potentially avoid people making the inference that because you have to bribe me to do this behavior, I won't do it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I think there's something very much to that. And so you do have to be careful. Katie Milkman she's always doing studies. They did some work with a lottery and trying to do lotteries with vaccination, I believe in the state of Pennsylvania, and found no real effect. I don't think they found a backfire, but they didn't find the sort of giant leaps in sign up that they were expecting. And they speculated that some of it was probably the inferences that people make about, well, if this is so good, why does it take so much? And I think that's probably partly marketing and thinking about how do you think about rewards that align with the goal? And so maybe it's not money for vaccinations, maybe it's a gym membership for vaccinations. And so like we're all working towards health goals together. And so thinking about how do you bring the incentive in line with the behavior so they make a little more sense.
Great, thank you.
No, that's wonderful. Yeah, I always laugh at the lollipop at the dentist. It's like, we just cleaned your teeth. Now let them rot. But what are you going to do?
Unaligned.
I know.
Sure,
Kids, kids dig the lollipops. Well, Lindsay, thank you again. If everybody could give Lindsay some of their Zoom emoji love. That was really wonderful. And I think people love your organization and your style and the calm and cohesive manner in which you say, this is all solvable. So thank you, Lindsay. We love having you here. The next event coming up is for people that are members of our community and who have taken are taking or will be taking our boot camp. Once a month, Kristen does live product consulting and teardowns. That's if you're in the course. We don't have that date set up yet, so it is TBD. And then we'll have another open event in July. Those all will be announced at our LinkedIn site in the near future. Look at us build anticipation and curiosity. Woo! And then, as I said earlier, if you'd like to work together, reach out to Amy at Irrational Labs. And these are all in the chat. If you're not on our newsletter, hot dog, you're missing out. Sign up. And then, yeah, if you want to just sit and have your brain melted by behavioral teardowns every day like this, like, oh, Kristen Substack is great fun. It's she's funny, smart, and educational. So what more could you ask for? Lindsay, any closing genius you want to share with everybody? I mean, you've already kind of like left most of the genius on the floor, you know, the proverbial, it's like you've brought it all, but is there any parting thought you want to leave us with?
I wish you had told me ahead of time that I needed a parting thought. I have
No, you were
nothing.
supposed, no, the answer was go eat a donut. Gosh,
Yeah,
Lindsay.
go have a really healthy lunch, not a donut.
And then have a lollipop. No, anyways, but thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of Friday. And thank you again, Lindsay. You're the bestest.
Thank you. Bye.